picks those things up. God brings them to a new place so they aren't so out of reach anymore. It's what Ezekiel is talking about in the first reading. I will take a sprig from the lofty top of a cedar. I will set it out. I will break off a tender shoot from the topmost of its young twigs. I myself will plant it on a high and lofty mountain. What Ezekiel is trying to explain is that God himself will bring those things that seem so impossible, so out of reach, so beyond our grasp, problems that seem unsolvable, and fix them, and place us in a place of honor. And most of the time, we have no idea, no clue how God is going to do it, how it's going to happen. It's sort of like the trees we see in the spring. We go all winter, we see the barren branches, and all of a sudden it gets a little warm, and you see the buds start to pop. And then one day you walk out of the door, and all of a sudden it's there. It seems like sometimes overnight the trees just bloom. And you see the flowers, you see the green leaves, and you wonder, when did this happen? It's the same with our garden. We have our youth come and they plant these tiny little tomato plants, and day after day, night after night, all of a sudden you walk out and here are these huge plants filled with tomatoes, and you wonder, when did that happen? And the message to us is that God moves and God acts without us ever knowing. So what Jesus is trying to teach in the gospel today, the kingdom of God is if someone would scatter seed on the ground and would sleep and rise night and day, and the seeds sprouts, and he doesn't know how. In this life of ours, there is a time for everything, even though we don't see when. Things are happening and God is moving whether or not we perceive it. There is a time in our life when we have to walk in our own blindness. And it's scary, not knowing when or how or if what we need and pray for is going to happen. When we just don't know what the answer will be, when a relationship will heal, or the answer we're waiting for will come, or a test result will turn out the way we want it to, or a decision that has to be made that affects our life will become clear to us. And the answer that we get may not be the one that we want. We aren't sure of the outcome, what we want to really happen. And at that moment, we have a choice. We have a choice as disciples. We can either cut and run in the other direction, or we can stop moving, stop trying, stop hoping, or we keep walking. Maybe blindly, not kind of knowing where we're going, feeling our way as we go along. Because to walk in the midst of that confusion and pain means we believe that there is something we are walking towards. Or to believe that we don't walk alone, but you believe. As long as you keep walking, it means that you have hope. St. Paul says it in the second reading, we walk by faith, not by sight. Sometimes we have to walk in blindness. We walk even though we don't see the end, even though we don't know where the answer is coming from. Believing we are not alone, that there is always our God with us, leading us. That no matter where the road leads, no matter the answer or the result or the decision, that God is with you. And that good, somehow, even if where we end up is not where we had hoped, or the answer is not what it seemed, or the relationship doesn't heal, or the test result is not what we wanted, that God will bring good out of it. That God will reveal God's self, even though we're not exactly where we want to be or where we ask God to bring us. Remember what Christ says at the end of the gospel. When the grain is ripe, at once the farmer goes with the sickle because the harvest has come. When we're dealing with God, there comes a time when everything will be made right. When what we have been walking towards and hoping for and praying for and asking for will happen. Christ uses the image of the farmer who waits patiently while the crops grow, not knowing how or when or if. And eventually what he is waiting for shows up. Good does come. Healing does really happen. Because God is working. God is working in our lives as individuals and as a world to bring about good. God knows what has to be done. God has the blueprints. We just can't see them. And so the question that the gospel poses to us today is, what is it that you need? What are you asking for? What are you moving towards? What are you hoping for? What is heavy on your heart? Today, this very day, this very morning, as we sit in this church, God is moving. God is acting. God is leading us towards where we need to be. And just because you don't see it happening or understand the road doesn't mean that God isn't working. Things that seem so out of reach, so unlikely, suddenly are there in front of you. And it's hard to believe that you can make it to where you need to be. But just because it's hard to believe doesn't mean that it won't happen. Again, we walk not by sight, but by faith. The kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is like seeds scattered on the ground that grow unseen, unrealized, and all of a sudden, there it is, in front of you. And when it arrives, suddenly we forget about the wait. The wait doesn't seem so long or so terrible anymore. This time of the year, we are aware how time moves and how things happen. All of a sudden, it's there in front of us. This past week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right up here, we had our ECC moving up and our graduation into kindergarten. Parents and grandparents and even the kids themselves are suddenly aware how God moves. That in our impatience and our busy lives, all sorts of things are happening unseen by us. And then suddenly there we are, sitting in church pews and in school auditoriums and on bleachers watching the movement of life. Elementary moving on ceremonies, high school graduations, college graduations. Things that seem so out of reach and so far away suddenly are upon us. These moments, though they are bittersweet, are signs to us. Signs of how God moves. When we doubt that God is there, when we doubt that God is listening and hearing, understand that God moves and works behind the scenes. Unseen, but with power and certainty. And when God suddenly shows up, we realize that God was really there the whole time, never leaving us. So that we know that lives with the power of God can be transformed. Profound evil and pain and fear can be overcome. Healing can happen. And miracles, my sisters and brothers, miracles quietly, often unperceived like seeds growing in the earth, miracles do happen. So walk blindly if you need to, but walk always in hope. Amen.